Number 7. Cassandra Hasanovich. In July of 2008, 24-year-old Cassandra Hasanovich was murdered by her husband, Hadrudin, despite measures that had been put in place by the court system designed to prevent him from being able to come anywhere close to his wife. Cassandra was sitting in the car with her 2 children in front of her mother's house in Bognor Regis, England, ready to go to a women's refuge. She was on her way to the refuge in an attempt to stay safe from her husband. Out of nowhere, her husband appeared, dragged her out of the car and stabbed her to death in the street with a large kitchen knife. An inquest into her death found that Cassandra was failed by the Crown Prosecution Service, or CPS, who should have done more to safeguard her life. In 2007, a non-molestation order was put in place by the courts, but despite Hadrudin continuously breaching the order, no real attempts were ever made by the police to take him off the streets, not even with Cassandra telling police exactly where to find her husband. Cassandra had gone as far as to flee to Australia, along with her 2 children, in fear and anticipation of her husband murdering her, but she was forced back to the UK after her husband took her to court, accusing her of kidnapping the children. Upon her return, her husband was made to sign an undertaking to neither approach nor contact his wife. Even with the undertaking in place, he still had on numerous occasions contacted Cassandra before the murder. Despite telling family and friends that she knew he was going to kill her, the police never made any real effort to arrest Hadrudin, eventually resulting in her death on that fatal day in July. He was arrested not long after the murder and in 2009 was sentenced to a minimum of 18 years in prison for murder after the jury had rejected his plea for manslaughter. The CPS later stated that it is now clear that there were shortcomings in the way we dealt with Cassandra's case, and that the murder was a watershed moment from which they learned many important lessons. Today's featured fan shout-out is Instagram follower Mission Housemate. To appear in our next video, send us your pic, rocking the latest merch from theywillkillyou.com, and send it in to us on Instagram today. Number 6. Jill Maher. Adrian Bailey was out on parole on September the 22nd, 2012, when he assaulted and murdered Irish-born Jill Maher while she was walking home from a pub in Brunswick, Australia. Maher had been reported missing 6 days before her body was found, about 30 miles north of where she went missing. CCTV footage eventually pinpointed police to Adrian Ernest Bailey, who was taken in for questioning and admitted to the murder after a lengthy interrogation by Australian police. Anger broke out when the media got word of his confession and subsequently found out and reported that, at the time of the murder, Bailey was out on parole for a series of sexual offences, as well as knocking out a man outside a Geelong pub. Had Bailey been charged with the Geelong assault that took place while he was already out on parole, then he would have likely been back behind bars at the time of the murder. The case directly led to the Australian state of Victoria tightening up its parole laws. A serious parole breach now leads to an offender being automatically sent back to jail. Number 5. Alina Sheket. In 2017, 20-year-old Alina Sheket had just gotten out of an abusive and controlling relationship with her former boyfriend, Matthew Darby, aged 21. She had sought a protection order against him and had reported to police when Darby broke into her Oakland, California home in September, a break-in for which he was arrested and released on bail. All of the combined steps Alina took to protect herself resulted in a protection from abuse, or PFA order. Unfortunately, the PFA order was unable to protect and save her life. 3 days after procuring the order and 3 weeks after the first break-in, Darby broke into her home again and bludgeoned her to death in the pre-dawn hours of October the 8th, 2017, using a claw hammer and 2 steel knives. Earlier, in March of the same year, Darby was arrested on suspicion of assaulting another ex-girlfriend of his after he'd called her 33 times over the course of a 2.5-hour time span. She allowed him to come over and gave him 30 minutes to talk before allegedly assaulting her. Darby was arrested and released on bail the next day. Law officials involved in the case argue that when Darby was arrested in September for breaking into Sheket's home, he should have never been let out on bail a second time. In October of 2018, Darby, in order to avoid the death penalty, pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Number 4. Meyer. 19-year-old Meyer Marcano, a Valencia College sophomore, was last seen at around 5 p.m. on September the 24th, 2021. 7 days later, her body was found in a wooded area 17 miles west of Arden Villas Apartments in Orlando, where she lived and worked in the building's leasing office. Meyer was discovered with her mouth, wrists, and feet bound by duct tape. Shortly before being officially reported missing, family members decided to enter her apartment for a welfare check and found her apartment in disarray and with blood on her pillow. A maintenance worker by the name of Armando Caballero, who worked at the apartment complex, quickly came under suspicion by family and police. Caballero had been seen entering her apartment using a master key just shortly before she vanished. According to people close to her, Marcano had repeatedly rebuffed romantic advances by Caballero. In the aftermath of Marcano's disappearance, Caballero was confronted on video by a family member of hers who told him, "There's evidence of an obsession. Something. You're fascinated with Meyer. As of right now, you have sent obsessive texts to Meyer. We have all seen the texts. You talked about giving her your life savings. You cash-apped her money, and you claimed that you weren't in touch." Police weren't able to act on these warning signs before her disappearance, and not even in the immediate aftermath of it. It took police 3 days to make a sufficient case against Caballero, but by the time they entered his apartment, it was too late. He was found dead from self-inflicted injuries on December the 27th. It wasn't until 5 days later that Marcano's body was found, and the investigation into her murder was closed. Number 3. Ellie Gould. Ellie Gould, an English sixth form student from Calney, Wiltshire, was found stabbed to death at her own home on May 3rd, 2019. She was murdered by her ex-boyfriend, Thomas Griffiths, with whom she'd recently broken up due to repeated and regular disruptions at her attempts to study, and because he subjected her to coercive control. Gould's father wasn't a fan of the relationship since Griffiths never talked, but Gould's mother, on the other hand, attributed this to teenage behavior. Nevertheless, Gould herself eventually decided to break up with Griffiths after realizing he was educationally sabotaging her. The Domestic Homicide Review into the case described it as, in this case, the perpetrator appeared to be disrupting Ellie's studying during an important period of revision, displayed insecurities, and appeared to be inducing guilt. Ellie sought a break from the perpetrator during their revision for mock A-level exams, but the perpetrator appeared not to accept this. Despite all the warning signs, neither Ellie nor the people close to her ever suspected that Griffiths would be crazy enough to want to murder her in retaliation. 17-year-old Griffiths was arrested shortly after the murder, quickly admitted to it, apologized for his actions, and was sentenced to a minimum of 12.5 years in prison. Today's topic was requested by Cali Girl living in Nevada. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Mary Lane Levesque. Mary Lane Levesque was found dead on January the 22nd, 2020 in a Quebec City hotel room. She was stabbed 57 times in her chest, stomach and back by Eustachio Gallesi, a 49-year-old convicted murderer out on day parole. Gallesi had spent the previous 15 years in prison for the brutal slaying of his wife in 2004. Within 1 year of having been granted day parole, Gallesi killed again. Gallesi had met Levesque, an escort worker, in May of 2019 during visits to an erotic massage parlor. A joint investigation by corrections and parole officials into the management of Eustachio Gallesi's case found that there had been warning signs that his case management team failed to properly assess. He was permitted by his parole officer to visit the parlor once a month, despite his history of domestic violence, something that should have never been allowed in the first place. Permission was subsequently revoked by the Parole Board of Canada in September of 2019, but Gallesi flouted the rules and continued seeing Levesque. He told police after Levesque's murder that he'd been frequenting the parlor 3 times a week and that the halfway house staff where he was staying was unaware of these visits. At some point, when he began feeling as if she was distancing herself from him, Gallesi started growing jealous. On the fatal day of Levesque's murder, Gallesi had gotten her to meet up with him for dinner, after which they went back to the hotel where he murdered her. In February of 2020, Gallesi was sentenced to life without parole, a sentence that many believe should have been handed down in the first place after murdering his wife in 2004. Number 1. Melissa Matheson. Melissa Matheson was living in a care home for people with autism in Knowle, England. In October of 2014, the 18-year-old, who was suffering from ADHD and autism, approached staff to complain of being stalked by 20-year-old Jason Conroy. A few hours later, she was found strangled to death. Despite staff being completely aware that Jason had previously tried to strangle both a teacher as well as his own mum, Matheson's complaints simply weren't enough. Matheson posed as the perfect victim for Jason, who was known to pose a risk to females, particularly young, petite women who he feels he can easily overpower. Even before her complaints of his stalking behavior, staff had previously seen him on the landing near her bedroom looking anxious and agitated. On that fatal night, he entered her third-floor bedroom and strangled her before trying to drag her to his second-floor bedroom. Staff who heard a loud bang found her unconscious on the stairs with him standing beside. She died 4 days later. A review of the case found that Jason, who had a necrophilia fetish, had still been allowed close to Matheson, despite her complaints and despite staff knowing everything about his deranged state. The review also found that Jason was even more dangerous than staff could have known. In March of 2013, at another residential school, he strangled another female staff member to the point of unconsciousness, at which point a male staff member intervened. A case review of the incident found that his actions should have been immediately reported to the police, but it was not. In the end, 13 recommendations came from the review, some of them at a national level, in an effort to prevent such an accumulation of errors from ever happening again. Thanks for watching. Would you rather miss a warning sign about a murderous ex or try to dodge an oncoming train? Let us know in the comments section below.